So with that, we will talk a little bit about the Science Gateways Community Institute, which brings this webinar to you. We exist to facilitate the community sharing of experiences, technologies, and practices, and that is at little or no cost to the community members by the NSF funding that we are provided for this purpose. We provide various online and in-person resources, or also as in face-to-face. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the 5 areas through which we support our community. So our first area is the Incubator, and the bootcamp that we're going to be talking about today is run by the Incubator, and it essentially offers a week-long intensive session in which you can learn about best practices associated with developing your gateway, as well as in particular to think about how to make your gateway sustainable. As part of that, we have a collection of experts who present during the boot camp, and those experts are available as one-on-one consultants at any time in a part-time basis. So do consider that a resource that you might want to tap into. Our extended developer support is all about consulting, and in that you can get a 25% of a person's time for up to a year to help on building a component or actually creating gateway for you if you're at a stage in your gateway that you need some help. The Scientific Software Collaborative has produced a gateway catalog, which is listing more than 400 gateways at this point, as well as software components that you can use for gateways. So it's a great way to discover and find resources that are either gateways you might want to learn from or examples of what you might do, but also for your own research use or use in the classroom, as well as the software components that you might want to use as part of your development process. And of course, you can list your own gateway there. Anyone's welcome to do that. So have a look and see if you'd like to add your gateway to that or a software component to that. Community engagement and exchange is the area that brings you this webinar. We also run a conference annually, which will be in September in Austin this year. And in fact, registration will be opening for that very, very soon this week. We hope you can come to that and participate in future webinars as well, and as well as have a look at the resources on our website. And finally, workforce development provides support to the developing workforce interested in science gateways. They offer internships, summer coding institutes, a hackathon is coming up soon, and also other workshops during the year. So that is the Science Gateways Community Institute in a nutshell. One quick appeal, I hope that you will give us some feedback at the end of this webinar about what you think of it. It takes actually just a couple moments to answer 2 what do they call them? Radio button questions. And then if you want to give us any additional comments or feedback about topics, let us know. So with that, I'm going to head into our topic today, which is a panel of people who've participated in Bootcamp. It just occurred to me that I should have included a slide that shows you what Bootcamp includes when it happens, but it's essentially a series of 5 intensive days that go through a bunch of different topics related to the having of an idea and finding an audience and implementing your gateway and thinking through each of those different aspects of that process. So we are missing a couple of our panelists, but we do have 3 of our 5 panelists here. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves briefly to tell us about who they are, what their gateway is, and how they came to decide to come to the boot camp in the first place. So with that, let's start with Anna Maria. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, thank you. Pleasure to be here today. So my name is Anna Maria Escherich, and I started at ET Austin about a year ago to be the project manager for an NSF grant that we received. And we are currently working on a 3D electron microscopy portal to help engage the neuroscience community together and provide a platform for everyone to work collaboratively with analysis tools available. And that's kind of our project in a nutshell. We're still in the very beginning infancy stages. So our portal is about halfway built and developed, so we'll begin doing some testing shortly. What brought me to the science boot camp was when I was invited, so I was excited to go and learn something new. And I figured, because I'm taking on such a new role and the science is different from my background, it would be a good opportunity to learn and help enhance my skills to be able to guide the project successfully and learn some new strategies possibly, and learn from the experts on how to move forward.
Great, thanks. Our next panelist, Gwen Jacobs, is not with us right now, so we will move on to Drew LaMar, who's at William & Mary.
Hello, I'm Drew LaMar, as Catherine already mentioned, and I'm a mathematician in a biology department at William & Mary, and I'm part of the QUBES Gateway, which stands for Quantitative Undergraduate Biology Education and Synthesis. Bit of a mouthful. We're going into our 5th year of a 5-year grant, and so sustainability is very much on our mind. But it's created and it exists to help faculty, mostly biology faculty at the moment, have a place to go where they can learn from others on how to sort of infuse quantitative techniques and computational techniques into their teaching. So we are an educational gateway, and we utilize a lot of the infrastructure stuff. One in particular, we push for allowing for software to be used in the classroom. So using cloud software in the classroom is one of our pushes. But our main sort of heart of QUBES is the faculty mentoring networks. So we utilize a lot of the community building tools and things that can be parts of mini gateways, so that faculty can get together. And it's sort of like rather than having a 2-day workshop and then they go to their institutions and then they don't talk again, what we try to do is to have them meet up physically at a conference, and then they go off and then they work together virtually over the course of a semester, and maybe they'll develop some teaching materials, or they'll implement something in the classroom, and then they'll meet regularly, like weekly, to help each other, give each other ideas and talk about ways that you might implement this. And so it's really a lot of it is a community building kind of aspect. What got me to Bootcamp? So we are utilizing HubZero as our content management system, and some of the PIs from HubZero are part of SGCI as well. And we are one of those hubs that came in to the Bootcamp after we had already started. So it was an interesting thing to come into and learn about all of these things about developing your gateway sort of after the fact. But pretty much everything that the Bootcamp offers, we were interested in. Sustainability, like I said, especially this year, is very much on our minds. But also the user experience design and the social media stuff, and a lot of the business ideas, like getting idea of who your competitors are, or the competitive analysis was very useful. So all of those things it just sort of made a lot of sense for us to go to the Bootcamp. So really enjoyed it. So I'll share more about that, I'm sure, as we go through the questions.
Thanks, Drew. Suzanne has not joined us yet for this panel, so we will move on to Derrick, who is joining us by phone also, like Anna Maria.
Thank you very much. Pleasant good afternoon to all. The name is Derrick Poon Young. I'm the recently retired chair of Cancer Computer, which is based here in Ottawa, Canada. Despite retiring, the organization is yet to find another willing chairperson, so I'm hanging in there for the moment until they can find another. I had offered to help build the organization for 1 year, which sort of morphed into 2.5 years. So I do run a company, so after a while, the maturity factor needs to take over. But I'm still very supportive of the organization. The gateway that we are working on is a cluster, a management cluster and a platform, and it is called Cancer Computer, at least in terms of how people refer to us. But essentially, the formal name and type is the Cancer Research, the Supercomputer for Cancer Research Organization. And essentially, our mission is to help accelerate the finding of a cure for cancer through the provision of high-performance computing resources. So that essentially is our mission. We have a management cluster, and we have 4 or 5 co-location facilities, 2 very recently in the U.S., and 3 here in Canada, 1 in Guelph, 1 in Gatineau, Quebec, and 1 here in our hometown of Ottawa. And essentially, we decided to, referring to the founder of Cancer Computer, his name is Roy Chartier. Roy and I decided to attend the Austin, Texas Bootcamp, largely out of a large dose of curiosity, a slice of our own institutional animus, and 3, wanting to sort of further refine and then ultimately define precisely what Cancer Computer is. And that was the aha moment that we both had and giggled, because sometimes you have a good notion as where you're heading, but to characterize exactly what game you are in or how you're going to make this play can be a little bit of a challenge. It may seem obvious to others coming who are already in that area and in the public sector, but the different characteristic in terms of how we define ourselves and our origination, we from the private sector. And although some of us, including myself, have an international development and research background in previous careers, those of us who founded it and co-founded it, Cancer Computer, we are from the private sector. So it was a question of being able to create this marital dance between the private and the public sector, and to engender a sense of kinetic dynamism through and into strategic investment financing, which is what I came up with. So making sure that we could immerse ourselves in a boot camp and not just simply go through the machinations of it, but to really draw and to learn, to network, to identify, to hear from others, to draw from others, to learn from others, and to really try and bring the two together to see exactly how best we can be positioned in that milieu. That was the driving reason for us coming to Austin, and we are very glad that we did. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Derrick. That was quite a testimony. And I'll just add that while you were talking, Suzanne Pierce joined us, so I'll have Suzanne introduce herself. Just share a little bit of who you are, what your gateway is, and what brought you to boot camp.
Hi, thank you. And sorry I was running late, but I'm Suzanne Pierce. I work at the Texas Advanced Computing Center, and I'm a research scientist. I principally focus on integrated water resources modeling and management problems, but that's expanded over the years into participatory processes and cyber tools and cyber approaches or digital objects of research that can make integrated modeling approaches more accessible to broad audiences. So moving beyond water and into oftentimes sustainability problems or socio-technical problems where you're working with humans and computers to try and bring scientific knowledge into conversations with groups. And so the gateway that we're really excited about, and the reason that I went to the boot camp, was because we've got a research community called the Intelligent Systems for Geosciences, and that's computer scientists who work at the nexus between artificial sciences, or artificial intelligence, automated reasoning, machine learning, advanced technologies that just aid humans basically in working through their various problems. And specifically the problems that we're looking at are with geoscientists. So how do we use AI and intelligent systems to better understand the Earth? And that includes all components of the Earth. So we've got polar scientists, geospace scientists, hydrogeologists like myself, deep Earth scientists, And it's a community of about 100 to 120 folks right now. And it's an extremely active community with many digital objects. And we've been placing all of those objects of our research that we want to share, from data benchmarks to algorithms and curricular materials. We've been sharing them all either through Google Docs or via a WordPress site. And we realized that we needed to make the transition to a more stable platform. And that was kind of the realization of a gateway may be the way to go, and we can create a more robust approach to handling the products of our research that we want to share, as well as continuing to build the community into a broader and larger community group. And so I think I answered all the questions, right?
Yeah.
That's why we were there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Well, we'll carry on now with I gave our panelists 5 questions or topics to think about, and we're just going to go through. You can take turns on whoever wants to go first. So the first question that we have, it's either the 5 questions about tools, resources, aha moments, things that are important, and things you're doing differently now or wish you were doing differently. I should have added, by the way, that of our panelists today, everyone was, except for Drew, was at the most recent boot camp that was a month and a half ago in Austin, Texas. So Drew was in the boot camp that was about a little more than a year ago. That was our first boot camp. And so he was a guinea pig participant in a way, and things have evolved a little bit since then.
You guys messed me up. I'm just kidding.
We really like to do our experiments thoroughly, yes. So then Anna Maria and Suzanne and Derrick were all just in boot camp not long ago. So I mentioned that because this question number 5 about what are you doing differently now or wish you were doing differently is partly because they haven't had much time to be doing anything differently just yet. So we'll go on to our first topic, and I'm going to take notes while we're listening to each person. So why don't we start with you, Anna Maria, and then next round we'll start with Drew, and then we'll go through the names alphabetically for fun, unless someone wants to pipe up with a comment. So are there some tools from Bootcamp that you wish you'd known about when you started your project?
So in thinking about all these questions, I'll start with saying that when I first signed up to attend the boot camp, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. And by the end of the week, and even when we were giving our introductions over there, I didn't even know what my contribution to our own project would be besides, facilitating as a project manager. And as the week progressed, I finally came to the realization, it's just oh, cool. I've done that. I have a ton of experience doing that. And nobody else on my team had that experience. So I'm just there's my contribution. So I was very happy about that. I think a lot, just because I wasn't very sure what I was getting into, or it really opened my eyes to be able to better understand my projects. And I think the most valuable thing for me coming out of that week was being able to sit with 2 colleagues that I don't work directly with, and being able to have candid conversations as we did a lot of exercises, and being able to get their input, discuss the project at length. One was the co-PI, so he was very familiar with the project, and so just learned a lot about the project I'm helping move forward, and what the gateway actually is that we're producing. But that's for specific tools. Prior,
Hello?
Do we lose you?
I think sorry, I was thinking.
Very quietly, okay.
Right, sorry. I think the biggest tool is really diving deep into the purpose. What is our purpose? What are we trying to project? And how are we able to clearly drive that purpose to others so that they will come and use our portal? They will come and, continue to use us as the years go on. So I think that's one of the big tools that, the week focused a lot on what our purpose is, to be able to really go back to the group and talk about that at length.
Great.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I am not muted in. Okay, good. For a second, I muted so I wouldn't type and make a lot of noise, and then I realized, oh, now I don't know if I'm muted. Okay, so thank you. That's helpful. So let's move on to Drew. So
I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Anna Maria said, but I think what I got from the boot camp that I wish I had when I started the project. And like I said, we kind of came in after we were like a couple years in, a few years in. So there's a lot of value in going through the boot camp because it gave me a lot of different filters upon which to view our project. And by filters, I mean, we would talk about business, we would talk about social media, we would talk about just website design. We would talk about, just the audience and who is your audience, and all of these different ways of viewing the project that I think was extremely, extremely helpful. And another thing that I found very useful was, just seeing a lot of other gateway examples of the bootcamp. So, when you go, you hear other people who are also either already into their project and they've already developed it to some extent or just starting. And it was just really beneficial to have another cohort of people that we could talk to and sort of see what the struggles that they were having and things that they were trying to figure out. And so just the community aspect was very, very beneficial. And we didn't really have that going into the start of the project. A little bit more specifically, and I think I already mentioned this, the filters that the aspects of the bootcamp that I think would have been really great to have early on in the project were that discussion about what is their mission, what is your vision, and who is your audience, who is your real audience, your different stakeholders. The stakeholder conversation was extremely useful, and kind of wish we had that early on. The filter of business, as an academic, I just don't think that way, and so it was really helpful to sort of try on this business hat, right? And learn a lot of those business ideas that I think would have been helpful early on. And then also the thing that I think we really gelled with and got really excited about was the user experience design. Thinking about, you have this website portal and you have the people that are using it and trying to think about, what's the usability, right? What do you want them to do and how do you want them to get there? And all of these things that I think would have been really helpful early on in the project.
And I'll add just also that at the boot camp, Drew approached us and said, "I want to do some usability evaluation of our portal." And there was another participant in the boot camp as well who also did so. So they went on to work with our Incubator consulting team, which is interns who are currently now supervised by Paul Parsons, who is on the call with us. So if any questions do come up about that, he is around and not expecting to be asked questions, but he is here on the call. So
that was an invitation.
Isn't Paul lucky? So anyway, yeah. So but at the time those interns were at University of Michigan. So I just thought I'd mention that. So all right, Suzanne, would you like to talk about your tools that you wish you'd known about? That you learned about?
Sure, definitely. So everybody's touched on things that I appreciated. I think for me, it was the perspective that really shifted. So a tool for me that is not, a concrete tool, but more of a conceptual tool was just the idea of looking at the gateway as a concept through the user's eyes. So that fits closely with that whole user perspective and user testing. But through the user's eyes as part of a service to the user and also as an opportunity for them to connect with our community was a really big aha moment for me when I realized the sustainability question can be resolved when you figure out what your user group and your community members need and are looking for. And it actually, it hasn't been that long since the boot camp, but it has transitioned and changed the way I talk with people about our gateway. And we're inviting various companies and user groups that have funding that are using our tools and interested in learning more and want training, and we're talking with them about partnering with us to support both financially and intellectually the gateway moving forward. So it really moved the needle for me in terms of taking things out of a purely academic and intellectual perspective and into the realm of more of a business perspective, that view of this is a service that we're providing. This is these are tools that people are hungry for, that we are uniquely positioned to offer. And that really was a major surprise for me through the whole process, and being able to feel comfortable with that and embrace it rather than having the traditional academic resistance to it.
Terrific, thank you. I hope I'm capturing everyone's comments well enough. Thank you. All right, so Derrick, what would you like to add?
I will simply add to my fellow commenters that I was glad to see the planning tools, the various planning tools across explained and offered up, as well as the working sort of sessions, the breakout sessions. I was glad to see that the heart at the core of those sessions were these planning tools, particularly for Roy, who I accompanied, as he, again, he's more from the technical architecture side. So whilst, of course, he does have a sense of planning, when you actually have founded an organization, private or public, having proper due diligence, making sure that things are strategically properly aligned, things are organized, and how you arrive at that level of professional organization. We come from the private sector, so therefore the business focus is somewhat very natural to us. But I'm also glad that there were these other tools that could actually shape your perspective, as mentioned just before I started commenting. And that has to do with going from the private sector into the sort of a public domain where, again, the business culture naturally is somewhat different. And I mentioned that because our approach to Cancer Computer, our science gateway, is very private sector driven in terms of not only its enterprise and dynamism, but its modeling, its business modeling. So we do not, nor are we intending per se to have any heavy preponderant dependence on public sector funding. We've put up our own money to do this, and through donations, etc., in the private sector. But it is good to know, because there is that market there, that other audience in the public sector, that as we have gradually gone along methodically, that we are discovering. For example, universities, medical institutions, research organizations, federal and provincial in Canada, government departments, their research arms. Well, they don't simply dole out money to you as IBM would to us. We give them, they ask for a quotation, we give them a price, and they pay. Well, no, you may have to be paid in the form of a grant, for example. So therefore, there is an application process, collaboratively so. So some of the tools provided during the 5 days in Austin were very, very helpful in terms of shaping. Again, we were aware of them, but it was good to be in an environment that helped shape your focus, created symmetry between how we do it in the private sector and how it probably should be done when you're dealing with public sector entities. So that was very, very helpful for us, certainly helpful for Roy. And then, being able to collaborate with others and share ideas and learn from others and from their own public sector experiences, that was powerfully a very good value added.
Great, thanks. Capturing this down. That's very helpful. Thank you. So this is great. I'll just pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions. There's nothing that has been posted in chat so far. And obviously we can come back to any questions later. But I don't see any, so I'm going to move on to our next question. So this time we'll let Drew start, and we'll cycle through everyone alphabetically by last name. And so resources that you have put to use. Go for it.
Wow, I mean, you should just put the list of things that SUCI offers, and I'll just sort of check all of them off.
Okay. Okay, usability consulting.
Yeah, so we did the usability consulting. That was something that we jumped on right away, and that was a really great experience. We've also done the extended developer support. So we got a developer to help. One of the things that we're pushing for is open educational resources, and we wanted to be able to allow users to adapt them. It's sort of like a forking in GitHub. And so we had someone develop sort of a cloning, forking of resources digital tool for us, and that went really well. And I went to the Gateways conference last year. That was really fun that you guys did that. And then I also had an undergraduate student who was working with me and also with SGCI through their workforce development program. And it was a great experience for him. I think he went to the Gateways conference with me, and he communicated with some of the developers over the summer. He was working with me. It was awesome to have a student go through that, and to have, to be able to talk to a lot of experts in the field of developing gateways. I think it made a huge difference in his career path. So that was another really useful thing that we did.
And I'll add that our workforce development helped bring him to PERC, so he could go to PERC conference during the summer, and also and then the Gateways conference as well, where I got to meet him. And you were also at the 2016 conference too, weren't you?
Well,
is that right?
I think I was. Maybe I was.
Or was that Sam? Maybe that was Sam that came to that or something.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember last year's, but
that was in San Diego. So. Great. So were there any resources that were specifically part of the boot camp that you put to use that you like things that they might have mentioned?
Trying to think if there's anything that I can point to that's concrete. Obviously, the usability services that we ended up doing a website redesign earlier this year in February, so that actually culminated in some actual concrete changes to our website. And then I also mentioned the developer services. Some of the things that were specifically from the boot camp, a little bit more amorphous, were a lot of the sustainability conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We have been, still thinking hard about, whether we want to get an industry involved and at what level that might be, and start to think about, sustainability, trying to cooperate with our home institutions and seeing what that might look like. But like I said, we haven't really done much yet around that. But that's something that has always been a part of our conversation ever since the boot camp. A lot of the mission and the vision statements, we've incorporated those into our updated website. And then a lot of the audience discussions and stakeholder discussions are also, always a part of our conversations as well. We're always thinking about the different stakeholders and how that might color what we do and the decisions that we make.
Great. Thanks. It's funny. It just occurred to me having you start with this question, and you're the one who's had the most time to think about these tools, I guess, whereas everyone else, resources were just a month ago. So with that, I'm going to put Suzanne on the spot and see if she's going to say.
That's great. So we've used two things actually specifically. One, we have refined our napkin diagram for how we think our system will be set up and how we imagine its primary features will kind of show externally. And then the other thing that's been really useful is revisiting many of the questions that we were asked to answer about the value proposition for our system. And so I've turned those back around and actually literally carried pages from the boot camp workbook with me into meetings with people and gone through the series of questions about defining the value proposition and defining what are those important features and components that would make your gateway something different, unique, and valuable. So that's been really valuable and useful, and I've used it both in group meetings. It's almost like turning a meeting with a scientific team into a focus group, and I've also used it in one-on-one interviews. We happen to be going through a requirements gathering process right now for a really large portal development project, so it really just was easy for me to push it straight into my already planned calendar and schedule of events. But it's been super helpful. The napkin diagram, too, has been great because we were able to present it at a telecon update call for our ISGO community and talk with people about what that exercise was like and what it meant and kind of get their input and thoughts on how we could modify things.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thanks. That's great to hear that there's a couple things you're like toting around with you to meetings and stuff. Derrick, you're up next.
3 sets of tools that we have been using, and actually 2.5 weeks ago, around the first week of June, we had a sort of an AGM, annual general meeting, but then we had a subset from that group huddle for a 2-hour session. We sort of used the session on finding your funding model to refine and actually to create a bit more discipline amongst that those 5 volunteers at Cancer Computer in that group, and they found it very intriguing and interesting because again, if money is coming in from particular sources, because of the nature of how we have been raising money on the private sector side, you can drown in honey, and that can lead to all sorts of potentially aberrant sort of practices. In other words, you can get into a degree of carelessness. So you need to be diligent at all times. So putting them to some of the tests related to, well, okay, how are you going to go about having a sustainable funding model, both private and public? That was very, very helpful, and yes, we plagiarized from the bootcamp, so our apologies, but it was very valuable. And that actually segued into refining and polishing part of our corporate pitch deck, if you want to call it that. And wouldn't you know it, a week and a half ago, a supporter who is a director at IBM Canada in the Montreal office asked us to pitch something to them, and chances are we may get a rack of servers, which totals an in-kind amount close to about 25,000 Canadian dollars, that strategically supports our platform. So that was an immediate result. And very impactful. Other tools that we've used, I distinctly remember Suresh Maru's session on technology and sustainability. One of the things that you can find amongst engineers, at least most engineers, and this is not I want to be careful about appearing to be, making a carte blanche statement. But there are quite a few engineers, certainly throughout my career, who like toys, and for them it's a toy. They don't care about the expense of the toy, they don't care about how long the toy lasts and so on. They do care, but for them that's not really their business. Well, being able to show the other group, we have 5 groups of volunteers, trying to show the sort of a technical team that, look, you have to align the procurement of specific types of equipment and the design of infrastructure. Those must be aligned with your strategic business goals. So that is part of the business architecture, not just the technical architecture and design. That was very, very useful. I don't want to say it was an eye-opener per se, because again, these are experienced individuals, 20, 25, 30 years of experience. However, it was very obvious for Roy and I, when we were going through this session with that group, that not a whole lot of thinking sort of goes into that, or the prejudice is just get me another high-performing toy so that I can fire it up and we are good to go. So that was, again, very useful, and we plagiarized from the notes and the presentation. And then finally, we spent a little bit of time on the sort of marketing and refining our audiences. We have 5 different audiences. So for that marketing group of volunteers, that again was another refreshing eye-opener for them to become a little bit more attuned to how you sort of design messages. Again, some of them are quite experienced on social media platforms, but there is a difference between somebody reading off a screen or reading an email, a promo or something, as opposed to when you actually face them face to face. The dynamic tends to be different, and other human factors come into play. So we did a bit of role playing and so on. So those were the 3-4 tools that we used directly from the bootcamp, and they were very valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, and I was going to say, you shouldn't apologize for plagiarizing the tools. The whole point is, what is it? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. The whole point is to put it to use. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Anna Maria, would you like to talk about resources you've put to use?
So I don't know about specific resources necessarily. Just like I said, we're still in the infancy stages. But I think what has helped me since we've come out is, and similar to what Suzette said as well, is just how I'm approaching conversation starters with some of my team and trying to maximize the most information and get it out of them so that I can understand everything at a more weed level versus high level. Especially since I'm starting to write like the annual reports and progress reports and things like that. I think a lot of what I learned and heard during the boot camp, I was able to, approach with a different perspective and be able to just extract better information from all the stakeholders and update and better understand. I think that has helped me out tremendously.
I just noticed that Gwen has just joined us.
Hi, yes, I have. Hi, yes, aloha.
Hello. Yeah, from beautiful Hawaii. We're going through one by one on these different questions, and
okay.
And if you like, we have just 15 more minutes till the end of the call. But if you want to take a moment just to introduce yourself, I just earlier on we had folks introduce themselves, say what their project is, and how they came to what prompted them to come to boot camp in the first place. And you could just mention that, and then
yes,
if you wanted to chime in with any other insights.
Very happy to, and I apologize. I must have had the time wrong because I was thinking we started in 15 minutes.
So well, here you are, yay.
Here I am finally. Okay, all right. Can you hear me okay? I'll put my headphones on.
Yeah.
Let me give it
Actually, I can hear you great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, can I jump in really? This is Suzanne. I'll just say I jumped on yesterday.
What's that? What did you say, Suzanne?
I got confused and I thought the call was yesterday, so I jumped on yesterday and hung around for a while and then realized I'd had the wrong day.
It must be June,
It is. It's the summer solstice. I'm sure that's what changed everything. Yeah,
messing everybody up. That's so funny. All right, so Gwen, why don't you just say a few things about why you came to.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. I'm Gwen Jacobs. I'm the Director of Cyber Infrastructure for the University of Hawaii system. And so in my role here, I manage our high-performance computing systems and training and support for researchers across all the campuses. I'm also PI of an EPSCoR Track 1 award, which is called EQI. It's focused on water sustainability in Hawaii and is a very large multidisciplinary project which has all kinds of domain scientists, geoscientists, geochemists. We're studying Hawaii's aquifers. It also has a social science component, education component. It's one of these very large, complicated projects. Central to that project is a science gateway that we have built, the underlying cyber infrastructure to support all of the research and dissemination activities of this project. And so one of the reasons, so we included this in our original grant proposal, which was funded in 2013, and so our plan was to build basically a science gateway that would provide the services for data management, annotation, analysis with computational tools, and then dissemination of data products to the community. We found out, I have a number of friends who are part of the Science Gateways Community Institute, so I was well aware of the activities and just was really excited to have the opportunity to attend the boot camp. Because when we started our project, basically we designed, using a lot of established software platforms. We used the Agave platform. We picked the best of breed and decided to design a platform, to meet a certain set of, to have a certain set of features. We never once thought about who was going to use it, who it was for, who would be receiving the products. We just did not think about it. Certainly that was a goal, but that was a very kind of fuzzy goal. And so for about the first 2 years of the project, we focused on building the platform, and I have two very talented software engineers who came to Bootcamp with me, Sean Cleveland and Jennifer Geis. And so now we're at the stage, of onboarding some of the users onto the platform just to do their basic data management stuff. But the Gateways Institute was so illuminating because we had not, as a team, the three of us sat down and really thought about, what is this thing going to do and who is it for and who's going to use it and what kinds of things, should it do. So the napkin drawing was really fun and very challenging for us. It was also really took us completely out of our, out of our kind of normal mode of work. Because Sean and Jennifer are software engineers, they work on the code all the time. I'm the PI. I talk about, the science applications. But the other part that was really useful for us as a group was that we were challenged to do activities that we normally don't do, like having to draw on the flip charts and present our stuff. So all that stuff was really good in terms of helping us get our heads around what it is that we're actually building and who it's for. So it was a great opportunity for us. What we're working on now is we're starting to work with our users more in terms of starting to onboard them onto the platform. And then my other big goal, I think this was one of my gateway goals, if I remember right. One of my big goal for the project for this year 3 of the project is to put together an interagency data sharing committee, which will be involved in folks that are part of my project, part of the project at the university, as well as state agencies, water managers, and others, and to really have those discussions about what kind of data should be shared, who owns it, what are our rules for release, things like that. So that's part of the real figuring out who our audience is. And so we will be able to demonstrate some of the features of the platform to those folks, but I think initially most of it will be a lot of really in-depth discussion to figure out what people's needs are and how this particular project can actually serve some state needs that are lacking right now. So, but I think I guess I can say I feel a lot better prepared to start to have those conversations with our stakeholders after going through the boot camp exercise. So it was super good.
Fantastic.
And really fun. and a lot of work and challenging. It was great. Met a lot of great folks.
Thanks, Gwen, and thanks for jumping in on the spot, not realizing you were going to start immediately instead of 15 minutes from now. So,
no problem.
So we have 3 more questions, and we have 8 minutes. So I'm trying to think. Whoopsie! Oh, I didn't even update one of the questions on the. Sorry. What was number 3 supposed to be? Aha moments. Oh, why something is more important than I'd realized. Okay, so let's have a vote here. Do we want to talk about aha moments or why X is more important than I'd realized, or what I'm doing differently now, or wish I were doing differently. Any from our panelists, anybody have any favorite of those three questions? Nobody has any favorites. Okay, so I'll go.
Yeah.
What's that?
I was saying I'm good with any of those.
You're good with any of them. Okay. And that was Suzanne I just heard. That was Suzanne, right?
Yeah, that was Anna Maria.
Oh, that was Anna Maria. Okay. All right. So then we'll start with this one then, and we'll just do this as our last item before we have to wrap up. So we'll give you each just a minute to talk about aha moments, and I'll take notes on that. And so we'll start with, since we were taking turns on who went first, Suzanne.
Great. Well, I may have already spoken to this. My aha moment, there were two key aha moments, and one was the recognition that I can think outside the box in terms of how I sustain and maintain the gateway going into the future. And the other aha moment was that by having my team there with me, I've got some very early career folks that I'm trying to bring along and help them start to become the leadership for our community, and the recognition that by having them join me at the gateway, I was able to start transitioning them into those leadership roles much faster than I expected to be able to do. And the conversations that were encouraged allowed them the chance to practice in a pretty safe environment. So that was really neat, and it's led to some great things. We've already had one of the folks present at a National Science Foundation all-hands meeting on behalf of our organization. So that was great too. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Derrick, you're up next.
Oh, my aha moment was a simple one. And some may laugh, but quite frankly, by Wednesday, Roy looked at me, I looked at Roy, and we giggled because that's when we knew we were actually a science gateway.
That's great.
It was, that's when we knew for sure. And the reason being is because I don't want to create a dichotomy, well, private sector people think this way and public sector people think this way, not at all. But again, without going into the history and the historical context of how Cancer Computer was formed, we have been positioning Cancer Computer, and just when we thought, yep, this is the right niche for what it is that we are doing, with enough differentiation from everybody who can get a rack of servers, and put up a UI and you're good to go, it dawned on us that essentially what we had been doing all along, and the formation that we've been going through was akin to that of a science gateway. So by Wednesday, sitting there as the presentation was going on, by mid-morning, we just sort of simultaneously looked at each other and we started to giggle. And when we went outside for a break, we said, this is what we actually are. So that was our aha moment, rather ecstatic for us, because it led to the fulmination of a lot of things that we have been doing, and therefore it sort of became nicely packaged and we came full circle. And since we left Austin, we have been going along a particular path that seems far clearer than what we were on before. So that was our aha moment.
Great. Thanks. Okay, on to Anna Maria.
So my aha moment, I think, and this is going to sound a little bit silly, but was truly understanding what a gateway was. When I first was asked to attend, I was like, okay, I was thinking it was more technical and learning about the servers and the portals and all of this. And then to my surprise, there was just a very small element of that during the week. So I think my big thing was I do understand this a lot more than I thought I did before, which is always a good thing. And it really did energize me. And I think a lot of that energy that I brought back to my team was just having like I stated earlier, the candid conversations, understanding the project more clearly for me, and just really being able to sit there and now truly look at what is our purpose, what are we doing, and driving that to get the portal up and running and to benefit all our stakeholders and our audience.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's see. I think actually Gwen comes up next, and then it'll be Drew.
Yeah, so I think my aha moment was, it was really as the groups were sharing, as we were sharing our napkin drawings and the other things as we went through the workshop. I think what really was surprising to me is the diversity of projects that we had in our cohort was amazingly broad. I mean, from all the different types of things that folks were doing, and just as we were all asked to do the same things, what started to resonate was just what those basic parts of the gateway are, what those basic kinds of features features or functions that a gateway does that cut across all the different ones. And I think as I listened to other folks talk about how the parts of their gateways really helped me think more about ours and how ours was organized. So I was just really struck with, we were such a diverse group in terms of how we were coming at this problem and who our stakeholders were and what our business models were. But what really came through was just those basic functions that gateways are supposed to do and how common those were across our projects. That was really surprising for me.
That's neat. Thanks. Yeah, this is fascinating to hear, actually. I'm glad we asked this. We're covering this question before we wrap up. So Drew, you're on.
There are multiple aha moments, but one that comes to mind is relative to the stakeholders. So every time we would talk about our stakeholders and thinking about, grabbing our gateway to certain stakeholders, we kept getting stuck. And I think it was during this boot camp that we sort of really kind of tore apart that we have actually two stakeholders. One of them are faculty that are looking to get access to pedagogical techniques for teaching quantitative concepts in their teaching. But then the other one was support for educational projects. It could be like NSF-funded projects, or even just teams that come together to build curricular materials. And we realized that they have two separate needs, and so that just the fact that there were these two different stakeholders kind of shifted pretty strongly the ways we were thinking about the gateway, and also fed into the user experience design, because if you have two different types of users and they have two different needs, you're going to need to address those in different ways via the website. That was a big aha moment for us.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I remember that came up also in the usability work that you did afterwards too. So fantastic. Well, we are now at the top of the hour, alas, and we don't have time for these other questions. I want to thank all five of you, late arrivals and everything, for joining us. This has been terrific, and I should have realized that we couldn't possibly cover 5 questions. I was worried we would have enough to fill the hour, but here we are. So thank you, everyone.